Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Welcome to all the new people on board. Great to have you here. So a lot has been happening. Holy macaroni. Things are happening both up in the northeast and in the south of all the front lines. Not a great deal of territorial change in the middle. So the Donetsk, southern Luhansk areas, as well as the Zaporizhzhia areas. Obviously stuff happening, but no territorial gains on either side. But there is lots of news to report in the Kherson region, and in Kupiansk and Liman, lots has been going on. Now, as well, you guys probably know, reported this weekend, the fact that Liman was liberated was huge news. But I just want to explain a little bit of what happened here. So this is War Mapper's zoomed in map. I'd say this is fairly inaccurate now. Things have changed since then, and I'll explain how. But just to let you know what happened with Liman. So you remember it was closing the bag. They were surrounded, encircled, apart from the Zaporizhzhia and Torska. What happened is the Russians appeared to have thrown in some reinforcements to open the corridor, and there was a sort of tactical withdrawal. Now, the pro-Ukrainian side are saying, "Oh, this was the killing fields here, and there were bodies littering everywhere, and it was an absolute massacre." The more moderate people are saying, actually, quite a lot of troops escaped. Now, what happened is, I think some reinforcements were thrown in. This opened up the corridor, and then as they were retreating, the Russians actually heavily bombarded this area with artillery. And so the Ukrainians were, the Russians were able to retreat and get back to Kreminna. What's going on now is the Ukrainians are slowly advancing towards Kreminna, and there is talk that the Kreminna is under some kind of pressure. So here we have, here we go. Sorry. The situation in Kreminna is getting heated. So again, this is yesterday afternoon. Heated for the Russians, according to this Russian report. The Svatove Kreminna highway is under threat. Just to let you know what that highway is, that is this brown road going from Svatove to Kreminna. That is under threat, as according to this source. Going further, if Kreminna falls, this could potentially create a threat of encirclement of Lysychansk. Okay, so you've got this sort of group of towns here. Lysychansk apparently is under a little bit of threat at the moment, and you've got Rubizhny and Severodonetsk. My theory in the last few days was it didn't look like the Ukrainians would have enough to encircle these towns, either one at a time or as a whole. I don't think they've got the forces, and the Russians have been, have both retreated here, but have also had time to prepare. But it seems like there's chaotic defense. It doesn't seem like the Russians have, because if I was the Russian commander and seeing what was happening in Liman, I would be saying, right, okay, Liman is going to fall. We need to make sure we are properly fortified in these towns, such that when we receive in the escaped troops from Liman, we'd be able to take them in and we'd have a pretty solid defense going forward. But it seems, I don't know, from the reports that are coming out, it's pretty chaotic, and the command and control is certainly not as effective as it should be. So it could be that you get some kind of contagion of crumbling. The morale is low. Escaped troops are pretty terrified, panicked, injured. The fog of war, all sorts of stuff going on. That Kreminna is actually a little more, or a lot more, victim to falling itself quite quickly. If it depends on how much momentum these Ukrainian troops have, but it could be that the Ukrainians are able to take Kreminna and pressure these from maybe pressuring Lysychansk on this side and having some kind of encirclement that works. My theory was that what happened in Liman would not be able to happen in these, because Liman is much smaller than all of these put together, and you could effectively encircle that with one-to-one troops. Okay, so what was brilliant from the Ukrainians is that normally, if you're going to do an assault on an urban environment, a town or city, you're going to want 7-to-1 troop ratio, because it's really expensive and costly in terms of troops and resources to overcome an urban environment. But they didn't. They had basically 1-to-1, and what they did is they encircled to the point that the Russians just had to run away. So rather than overcoming the Russians, they forced an escape, or they forced a retreat. My theory is that that would be much more difficult to do with this larger environment, but it depends kind of what frame of mind these Russians are in, and it seems like it's a bit chaotic in Kreminna, and you could get them, running out there and a crumbling of the defences. I don't know. We shall see. But what else is happening is further up north to Kupiansk. So just to take you back to this map here, you've got the Oskil River, and the advances have been made towards Liman and now towards Kreminna and these other towns. You've got Svatove as an important hub, but less important now because Kupiansk was taken, which means that this railway line is ineffective. So the Russians can't really use that, although they can use the road networks to supply through Svatove from up north. So really, Starobilsk is what the objective should be, in my opinion. I think this is more important than these towns, at least in the immediate future. Because if you take Starobilsk out, then, as I said yesterday, you have to then take all of your supplies down here, and then through westwards from Russia through Luhansk, like the city of Luhansk. That is much more difficult for the Russians to do and time inefficient. So Starobilsk has definitely got to be the number one priority, in my opinion. But hey, what do I know? So therefore, the stepping stone there is Svatove. And what we are seeing is that Svatove is under threat. So zooming in just a little bit, we have Kupiansk. The Ukrainians are breaking out from Kupiansk further down south along the Oskil River, directly down south, but also they have encircled a town on the way to Svatove and are up to another one. So let me just show you how far they've got. So this is my quality cartography again. Here's Kupiansk, here's Svatove. They have not only gone further down here to a village sort of almost parallel with Svatove, but they are making moves down south. Not as far as Borovar. Borovar is holding out, it seems, but the question is, what are the Russians going to do here? Are they going to bother staying on there or retreat back to Svatove? Because at the moment, the Ukrainians have made some great progress yesterday. They have encircled Kislivka, which is manned only with military police. So the quality of the troops left in, well, they're not effectively troops, they are military police, is poor. And so what's going to happen there? And they have further advanced past there and are being held at Kuzanivka. The Russians are holding here. What will happen? Will they try and hold out here to give some breathing room between there and Svatove? What will happen with Borovar? Will the Ukrainians sort of basically have a front line that looks like that, or indeed a front line that looks like that? Okay, so they are knocking on Svatove's door. So this is really fluid at the moment, and they have suddenly made a bunch of advances at the same time as they have made advances, obviously, towards Kreminna. It's all happening up here, but it's not just all happening up there, it's happening down in Kherson as well. This is the Institute Study of War map. This is now out of date, and they really need to update it because, wow, there was some movement from this northern part of the Kherson region. Now, there's been talk about there possibly being a bit of a feint. So this is Davidi Breed. And over the last couple of days, the Ukrainians have been putting a concerted effort on Davidi Breed. Attacking that, and it could be that this was a kind of a feint, drawing troops away from defending some of these areas, and even really sort of quite far down south in Duchany, bringing forces across here to defend Davidi Breed. And as they did that, they then actually attacked from the north, and have made loads of territorial gain. So 20 kilometers in one day. And in fact, news is that they only stopped because it got to night time. So they have probably moved further today. This is almost certainly out of date. Right? They absolutely marched on down along the Dnieper River to Duchany, 20 kilometers. That's a huge gain. Here's another map to show you exactly what's happening. Hopefully quite clear there. This then puts Davide Breed at risk, because if you, or not Davide Breed, but this whole pocket of Russian resistance up here, because if you are flanking them down here and you've got enough troops to support this and can pressure all along these lines, then you can effectively come across here and cut this entire area off. And there's no doubt quite a few troops here, because there's about 20 to 25,000 troops in this whole area. And they are all cut off because the bridges and pontoon bridges and actual bridges and ferries and pontoon ferries have been consistently hit, so that they are lacking in supplies, but also troop movement is difficult and nigh on impossible across the Dnipro River. This is a really big piece of news, and it's you know, a pretty bad situation for the Russians to be in. Now here's Deep State. So well worth checking out this map. deepstatemap.live. You can do some really funky things with this. So this is the Kherson area. This is slightly out of date because they have moved down to here. So the Ukrainians now control this area. And they're also putting pressure on in the Davide Breed area. And as I was saying, hopefully they can join that up and cut off the Russians in this northern pocket. Now, what you can do with this map that's particularly interesting and useful is you can select artillery. So let's say the M777. So this is a howitzer that the Ukrainians have been given. You can select that, and then you can select what munitions to put in that artillery, what projectiles. So you could go for the Excalibur that have the longest range, or you can go for the shortest range, M107, that have about 22-kilometer range. Okay, let's go for the shortest range, right? And we're going to put, here's Kherson, the actual city. And if we put one there, okay, that's not going to reach. But it can pressure quite a bit. Okay, let's change that then. Let's change that to the Excalibur. So the same piece of artillery, but with a longer range projectile. Put it in the same place. Now you can hit Kherson. The question is, will you want your artillery as close to the front lines as that? Probably not. They want to be slightly safer behind the front lines to some degree. But that's a very interesting tool that this map allows you to do. Now, where it gets even more interesting, in my opinion, is up here in the Severodonetsk and Lysychansk Kreminna region, is you start putting some artillery. Let's go and put your, I don't know, some Caesars, Panzer Howitzer 2000. Okay, so this is one of the best pieces of artillery in the world. And let's put some M549. So this is in service. They do use these. Has a 40-kilometer range, so that's a really decent range. And we start putting some artillery here. Okay, wow. Woo, what? Okay, so we can actually put it way back. Actually, we can have Liman will be able to hit Kreminna, Rubizhne. It's at the top range. So if we start moving into this area that they've now taken, these towns are now in artillery range. Now, obviously, the issue is they don't want to flatten these towns because these are Ukrainian forces trying to liberate Ukrainian towns. They don't want to flatten them. But you can hit, especially with the Excalibur projectiles, you've got a far greater accuracy, being able to hit certain depots or certain strategic points. Really, really good map, this deepstatemap.live. And you can see actually what tactically the Ukrainians, for example, can do with the munitions that they have. That's why this is so important. This territory they're taking here is things are now in range. And you can do the same up in Svatove as well. So you can say, okay, now that they are down, they've got this little village surrounded, and they're pretty much down here. What can they hit with their artillery? Well, let's get their M777 again, and let's get a pretty standard piece of projectile there, M795, at least I presume it is. And goodness me, assuming this is now taken, Svatove is in range. But even back here, you can hit pieces around here, and we know that over the last week, certain hubs have been hit to the east and to the north and south of Svatove. So the HIMARS have been active, and the MRLS have been multiple rocket launcher systems have been active around Svatove, which is shaping the conflict. So this is doing the groundwork and laying out the foundation for attacks. And they've just been really intelligent in their warfare, the Ukrainians. Okay, so hopefully that was interesting and useful. This is from Phillips O'Brien last night, saying stories that Russian command and control has broken down so spectacularly in Kherson. So again, to take you back to where we were before. So going back to what's the best. So here, this is a decent enough map. This shows that they lost that area so quickly. But Phillips O'Brien goes on to say it was so spectacular that one unit has gone onto social media to beg for air support. Here's the quote: "Does anybody know how to contact HQ? We need aviation like never before." I get the feeling that the entire Russian front is collapsing rapidly, not just Kharkiv. Wow. So the Russians are that desperate that they have to get onto social media to ask for support in the Kherson front. That is desperate times for them. Okay, what else has been going on? Let's talk a little bit about this conscription. So I was, in a sense, called out yesterday. Not called out. I made a claim based on the abstract notion of throwing in conscripts into the front. Right. My point was this: that if you had Liman had 5,000 Russian troops and you had 5,000 Ukrainian troops, or maybe even 3,000 to 5,000, it was almost parity in troops. They were encircled, and the Russians felt they had to escape. Right? If you had 15,000 conscripts thrown into there, the dynamics and the calculation would have been different, and the Russians would have felt, hey, we've got a shed load of boots on the ground here. Even if these guys are pretty useless and they have very low morale, there is a chance that Liman wouldn't have fallen in the way it did, or at all. So that was basically my point about conscripts. But I was called out, and rightly so, to say that actually conscripts aren't really that useful, and they could in fact be more of a problem, more of a hindrance than a benefit. And absolutely taken. So I was just making this point about the abstract notion of putting boots on the ground. But here, I mean, there's so much evidence that the conscripts are either don't want to be there, the wrong type of people, as in sort of old and not fit. I don't want to be ageist, but you know what I'm saying. Here we've got a group of conscripts, and on parade kind of thing, they've got bottles of vodka, and they're turning around. You know, this is evidence that the level of conscript is not looking good, is it? Particularly, and there's lots of evidence of this. And in fact, what I want to say about conscription is this. So I was talking about yesterday that, hey, boots on the ground, you shove 10,000 conscripts into this particular place, it's going to be tactically quite useful. The idea is, I'm assuming that the usefulness of these conscripts is going to be somewhere from 0 to 10, right? 10 is these are amazing, they're amazing troops, high morale, really well equipped, super well trained, thrown into the front line, brilliant. Russians are going to absolutely succeed with the fantastic conscripts. 0 is they're not going to be useful at all. But of course, that's not the only option. What we could look at it is actually those conscripts could have a negative influence on how well the Russians can do and their capacity. So there is some argument to say that putting in conscripts with almost no training and very bad equipment is almost equivalent to putting civilians on the front line. So imagine you are in a unit with experienced soldiers, you've been fighting for weeks and weeks, months and months, and then suddenly you get an influx of people that barely know how to shoot a gun, right? They are drinking your water, eating your food, firing your rounds. They are those rounds that you should be firing, and if you were firing those rounds, you'd be doing a better job at it, right? Getting in your way, you're having to command them, look after them, baby them, train them, right? These are on the job training. This is what is arguably going to be happening with a lot of these. It could be that the net benefit of these conscripts is actually negative. It's not a benefit. It's a net negative. And it could be that throwing a bunch of conscripts into the fray would cause more problems for the existing Russian troops and actually negatively affect their capacity to do their job. And indeed, this is what one commenter on my thread on the last video said in reply to me using that kind of abstract idea that 15,000 Russian conscripts shoved into this town would have made a meaningful difference. And he says, I hear you, man, but like I was an infantryman in Ramadi in 2006, back when it sucked. It wasn't Ukraine, though. If you threw a load of random dudes off the street from random town USA into Ramadi back then and told them, quote, learn as you go, you would have had weeping, begging men in the fetal position getting flexed on and eradicated. And just having them there would have totally degraded our warfighting capability. We literally would be better off with them not there. They would have made our situation worse and added nothing. I don't see how this is any different. These mobilized conscripts are basically civilians with guns. They're going to weaken the lines anywhere they're stuffed, and the more of them there are, the less combat effective they'll be. Like, they got yoinked out of their beds and thrown onto a battlefield before they had even pooped out their last civilian dinner. The only way a force like that beats a modern army is by giving them PTSD and they're having to murder so many of them. You're going to see lines collapse everywhere they're relied upon. My old soldier's gut is damn near certain of it. And I really appreciate that. Set me straight here. I was talking in the abstract sense, but the reality of boots on the ground with these kind of boots on the ground is that they are arguably going to negatively affect the fighting capability of the Russian forces. And so realistically, I mean, this is kind of an open question, which is, okay, what effect will they have? Will there be pockets where they're beneficial and add to the Russian forces and at least delay Ukrainian advances as it looks at the moment? Or will this all be thoroughly problematic no matter where they're put? Are all the conscripts, the worst version of the conscripts that we have been hearing about in these videos I've been showing you, or are there a good deal of these who are experienced reservists who have fought in previous conflicts? Because there is going to be a mix of quality reservists as well as effectively civilians. We shall see. So that's it's a very interesting calculation to be done here, and maybe in different places they will have different effects, right? So in this particular place, you get slightly more conscripts who are better trained with better equipment, and actually they're fairly okay. Maybe some reservists who have fought before and have military experience, but then in this other town, you've got a whole bunch of effectively civilians. Who knows? The truth will come out, it'll all come out in a wash, no doubt. Now, I heard a great comment on one analysis I was looking at, which was Russia at the moment has no good strategy. They don't have problems, they have dilemmas. So a problem is something you can solve, okay? And then, so say Russians say, I've got a problem here in Kreminna, if I do this, we can succeed. They don't have any problems, they just have dilemmas. And a dilemma is kind of like, well, if I do this bad thing happens, but then if I do that bad thing happens. So which of these bad outcomes do I, is least, what's the least worst option here? So if the Russians don't have problems, they have dilemmas, they are in a whole heap of issue here. So I think that's a really good way of looking at the issues that they have, because they only have conscription. You could include chemical warfare. So there are possibly three options here: conscription, then chemical warfare, then nukes. That's it. And conscription may delay things, but it may make things worse for them. And really, then they're like, okay, well, then we really are at nukes. Is it just delaying the inevitability of nukes, or delaying the inevitability of a coup that unseats Putin. And although months ago I was saying coup will never happen, he's got such a stranglehold on Russian popular feeling and sentiment through the propaganda and internal security services. Will those internal security services, will the people in charge of those internal security services turn on Putin? This is becoming, I think, much more realistic, which is really hopeful for anyone, wanting a lasting peace here. So anyway, that's a bit of analysis for you, a bit of opinion, really. What do you guys think? Am I wrong in what I'm saying? Let me know in the comments. This is, again, so talking about they don't have problems, they got dilemmas. This is a really good example of that. Okay, so 7 people were injured when shells hit residential buildings in Mykolaiv. So just to let you know, Mykolaiv is down by Kherson here, and this has been under sort of rocket attack fairly consistently for the entire war. Okay, now here's the issue. Once again, S-300 missiles meant for air defense were used. A large fire broke out in the city after the attack. Okay, the problem here, the issue is that the Russians are having to use S-300, which are air defense, surface-to-air missiles. They should be used to hit Ukrainian aircraft or Ukrainian cruise missiles or Ukrainian UAVs or whatever, like drones or whatever. Those S-300s are designed for that. They're not designed for hitting ground targets. So what does this tell you? This tells you that they are low on or have run out of cruise missiles, or keeping some back for particularly important targets. They've got more surface-to-air missiles than they've got cruise missiles, which usually they'll fire them off from long range, drop them from planes, or fire them off from submarines and warships far out of the way, and they'll hit Mykolaiv. Instead, they're using surface-to-air missile armaments from somewhere in this region, one would think, to shoot at ground targets. They are in trouble. Like, if that's happening, they're in trouble. Okay, bad news for the Ukrainians. Yesterday, I reported that there was a massive crater in Dnipro. So that is here. Okay, so that the huge crater that was hit. So that is probably some kind of cruise missile used effectively. Why was it effective? Well, more than 35 employees of Ukraine's security service, including foreign advisors, says more than 40 people are missing. That is a terrible loss for the Ukrainians. Now, this is, it's horrible. Like, this is human life being lost. Terrible. But if you're Russian, this is what they should have been doing for months and months and months. So going back to this, if they've used an S-300 to hit a residential building, that is just a waste, an absolute waste, when this is what they should be doing. More recently, they've been hitting energy infrastructure and transport infrastructure. That's this kind of thing. That is a sensible, strategy to take. But at the same time, they're also wasting missiles at seemingly residential targets. Now, of course, is this propaganda? By point of fact, I mean that was this really a residential building? Is this what the Ukrainians are saying? Was this actually a residential building being used by Ukrainian command and control, etc., etc.? But definitely over the course of this whole conflict, from up and down this map, right? So when they were attacking all of these places right at the beginning of the conflict onwards, there was so much focus on hitting residential targets to kind of break the spirit of the Ukrainians, when in my opinion that was just completely wasting munitions and resources. They have just not fought a very clever war. Anyway, that's my opinion. I talked to you yesterday about these sea mines that were buried in a trench and then blown up, right? You go back and look at yesterday's video if you want to see them that played out. Here is one theory put across by the Ukrainians themselves, saying it could be So you may remember yesterday the videos I posted showing the burial of what seemed to have been mines, and then they were blown up. Some feared Russia could contaminate the soil. So one of the theories was they were going to bury these mines and then put loads of contaminated soil on top and then blow that all up, spreading all that contaminated soil. People were like, what's going on here? Well, UA Online, so Ukrainian army, reckons it was just another fake. So the idea is that they were blowing this up and to catch it on camera and then say back to the Russian public that, look, we've hit a Ukrainian ammunition depot with just one strike. Look how precision our artillery is, and look how we've taken out this massive depot. This is a huge success. Of course, it's been caught on drone footage by the Ukrainians, so they can't use this because the Ukrainians have filmed them filling up a trench with mines and then blowing it up. So it might not have actually been the Ukrainians that hit the trench, but the Russians that hit the trench in order to do this fake about, the success of their artillery, so on and so forth. Anyway, there you go. That's just enough for me for today. I might add some things later because things are pretty dynamic. It's all happening up here. Where are they going to hit next? Are they going to hit Kreminna, or are they going to hit Svatove, or both? Are they going to try and hit Lysychansk as well to do a flanking maneuver? Okay, that's a question down there. And then down in Kherson, what are they going to do? They've got down to Dushany, which is 20 kilometers south, and they would have got further today. Are they kind of trying to meet up with the Davidi Brid salient, or are they going to try and get down to Nova Kakhovka? And that would be a huge issue for the Russians, because if they then control this area and the dam and the railway line across there, then, Russians are in super trouble. Are we seeing a quick contagious crumbling of the Russian forces all over? So one more thing to say about this Kherson front. So the Russians actually, I think, rotated their troops and put in a really weak unit here, which is arguably what allowed the Ukrainians to take advantage and do as well as they did. So in some kind of rotation, they replaced fairly decent troops with very weak troops, and lo and behold, the Ukrainians bust through. So there you go. Anyway, please like, subscribe, join my channel, give thanks, or buy me a coffee. It's all in the description below. Thank you so much for the really kind words yesterday. For a lot of people on the thread, I read the whole thread yesterday. Really kind words. Thank you for your support. This is what it is. This is what I do. The MS in my name, Jonathan MS Pierce. I do have multiple sclerosis, so excuse me if I get my words wrong and have pauses. Put me on speed talk using the cog and on the YouTube video, and increasing the speed of the video if you want. But the MS, they are my initials. It's just complete fluke that it correlates with my condition. I put that there because there's a famous football commentator in the UK called Jonathan Pierce. So in order to differentiate myself from him, I as an author and doing all the things I do, I'm Jonathan MS Pierce. And I also have MS. So hey, isn't life funny? Thanks for your support. Take care, and I'll catch you tomorrow.